Welcome back to Cake and It's Special. I'm Lauren and this week I'm going to show you how I made a mermaid cake topper. So here we go. Okay, so I decided that I wanted my mermaid to be sitting on a rock. So to achieve this, I take a bowl of Rice Krispie cereal and some marshmallows that I've melted and then mixed together. Remember to put shortening everywhere when doing this, on your hands, on your spatula, on your work surface, even places you weren't expecting to get marshmallow. I use a rubber spatula to combine until they are cool enough to handle, then I use my hands. I pour the bowl onto my work surface and form it into the shape I want it. You need to make sure it's quite well compact. When I'm happy with the shape, I leave it aside for 10 or 15 minutes to let it firm up, and then I give it a layer of buttercream. I'm not going to bother with a second layer of buttercream because I don't want this to be smooth. So I've taken some white and some black fondant and marbled them together for the fondant to cover the rock. I'm in no way worried about having a smooth finish on this, so much so that I'm going to crumple up some tin foil and press it all over it. When I'm happy, I can then insert a wooden skewer straight through the top to support my mermaid. I'm going to leave this aside for a couple of hours to make sure I don't get any fingerprints in it while I'm working with it. For my mermaid, I'm going to start with her tail. For this, I'm using fondant with Tylose powder. I have more time with it this way than modelling paste, but it's still going to set nice and firm. I've dyed her tail using Renshaw's Magenta Fugue Gel, and I'm just going to roll it out nice and long, getting thinner at one end. Get the thicker end of the tail onto the wooden dowel, sticking it in place with a little water. Then position the other end of the tail. Push a piping tip into the tail at an angle to create some scales. I just wanted to do a cluster here and there. I didn't want to have too many. For the fins, I take more of my magenta fondant and add a little white to it to change the shade. I roll this out nice and thin and use a peony petal cutter to cut out each fin. I also use a balling tool and a petal pad to ruffle the edges to give it a bit more movement. And use my knife to cut them to size and then attach them to the end of the tail, again using a little bit of water. I take my time and position them how I would like them. I think it just gives it a bit more of a nice finish than just sticking them straight on. When this is done, I can start on her body. For this, I dye some Renshaw's modelling paste with some skin tone food colouring, and I start with a petal shape and use my finger and thumb to pull out a neck. I flatten down the shoulders and the chest and then pull in her waist. I use my fingers to work in some boobs, and when I'm happy with that, I can then cut it down to size and then use a sculpting tool to push in her collarbone. I can then thread that onto the wooden skewer. Then I take some more of the fondant that I use for the fins and roll out a long cord that is thinner at both ends and wrap it around her waist. For her head, I take more modelling paste and I start with a ball which I run my finger straight across the centre. I use my thumbs to work in a chin. I also use my thumbs to push in from the eye sockets to create the bridge of the nose. And then I pull out a nose at the bottom of the bridge. I use a sculpting tool to push in some nostrils and then move on to the mouth. I do this by lightly drawing in the mouth shape that I want and then use my sculpting tools to work it into the face. I can then slot that on top of the neck. I want her eyes to be closed, so I take some more modelling paste and flatten out a little disc that I can then cut in half, then stick them to each eye socket. For her hair, I dye some fondant a really pale yellow and add the first layers of her hair around the base of her neck, drawing in lines as I go. When the first layer is on, I can start with her arms. I couldn't put her arms on before I started doing her hair because I wanted one of her hands to be in her hair, because I feel that's what mermaids do. They sit around all day thinking about how pretty they are and do lots and lots of self-grooming, right? So for the arms, I take more modelling paste and roll out a cord. I use my finger to work in an elbow and a wrist, and then flatten out the hand. I'm just doing mitten style hands today, so I cut out a triangle at the side for the thumb. Then I can stick one end to her shoulder and stick the other hand to the top of her head. I rest the other arm in her lap. For her bra, I take two petal shapes and draw lines across them like shells, and then stick them in place. They always have shell bras, don't they? It's never like seaweed bras. Now I can carry on building up her hair. Next, I take a really small cord of fondant and place it in between her shell bra, and then push in some tiny pearl sprinkles that I have for some more detail. Now for my favourite part, out come the rainbow dusts. I add some pink into her hair to give her a bit more of a fantasy-like look, and I also add some to her cheeks. For her eyeshadow, I went with green with a touch of pink and purple. Now, I don't wear makeup, so I don't know if this was any good. I also watered down some pink for her lips. When doing her eyelashes and her eyebrows, make sure you're paying attention. I was too busy looking at the camera angle and smacked her straight in the face with my black food colouring. I cleaned it off as best I could with a clean damp paintbrush, and then carry on with her eyes and her eyelashes. I add some pearl sprinkles that I use on the bra into her hair. Then I take the same colours I use on her eyes and paint them onto her tail. Then finally, I use my Sweet Sticks palette to add some rose gold to her bra. And finally, I add a little pearl lustre down her tail, like how the light would be reflecting. And there she is. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you did like this video, please do subscribe to this channel. I bring you a new cake tutorial every single Wednesday. So hopefully I will see you next week. Thanks, guys. Bye.